Let's talk about something that echoes deeply in both philosophy and human experience. The cascade of emotions that, if left unchecked, can spiral into suffering. It's a process like the Jedi teach, which begins with fear and slowly, subtly transforms into something much darker. By understanding how the emotional cascade works, we can learn how to break free from it before it leads into deeper pain. It all begins with fear. Fear is one of the most basic, primal emotions. It's a survival mechanism, something that alerts us to danger or the threat of loss. But while fear can protect us, it can also imprison us. When we don't confront our fears, whether they are fears of failure, rejection, or even deeper existential fears, they start to grow. It's not the initial fear itself that harms us. It's the fear we hold on to. The fear that festers and grows in the back of our minds. It builds momentum and eventually it leads to something volatile. Anger. Anger is often a secondary emotion, something that arises when fear or pain has gone unresolved. When we feel powerless, when our fears aren't addressed, we lash out. Anger is how we try to take back control over situations, people, or ourselves. But while anger might feel empowering in the moment, it's often just masking the deeper fear that's driving it. Think about it. How many times have you been angry at someone or something, only to realize later that the anger was really about fear? Fear of loss, fear about being hurt, fear of not being good enough. Anger, when left unchecked, is fear in disguise. As anger builds, it doesn't just sit still, it seeks a target. It needs something or someone to blame for the internal chaos. This is where anger starts to turn into hate. Hate is anger with a focus. It's anger that has found an outlet. It's when the frustration and fear become externalized, when we begin to project our inner turmoil onto others. Whether we hate a situation, a person, or even ourselves, this emotion is destructive because it narrows our perspective. Hate blinds us to empathy. It blinds us to understanding. It tricks us into believing that our anger is justified and that the world outside of us is the enemy. Hate is perhaps the most dangerous stage of this cascade because it creates division. It separates us from others and it separates us from our true selves. When hate takes root, it no longer is an emotion. It becomes a lens through which we view the world. And the more we hate, the more we solidify this lens. The more we convince ourselves that we are right in our anger. That we're justified in our hatred. But here's the truth. Hate never solves anything. It doesn't heal the wounds we carry. It doesn't address the fear that started it all. Instead, it intensifies it. That's when we enter the final stage, suffering. Hate inevitably leads to suffering, and not just for others, for ourselves as well. The more we hold on to hate, the more we suffer. It becomes a feedback loop. The more we suffer, the more fear we feel, which leads to more anger, which leads to more hate. It's a cycle that feeds off itself, keeping us trapped in an emotional prison of our own making. This is why, as the Jedi teach, fear leads to suffering. It's not an abstract concept, it's a process that plays out in our daily lives, often without us even realizing it. Suffering is the inevitable consequence of letting our emotions go unchecked, of allowing fear to build into anger, anger into hate, and hate into pain. But the good news is that this cascade is not a one-way street. We have the ability to stop it. We can confront our fears before they turn into anger. We can acknowledge our anger before it turns into hate. And by doing so, we can prevent the suffering that follows. So, what can we do? It starts with awareness. You have to be willing to look at your emotions honestly and ask yourself where they are coming from. If you're feeling angry, dig deeper. Is it really anger or is it fear? Are you angry because you're afraid of something? Are you projecting that fear onto others instead of confronting it within yourself? By bringing awareness to your emotions, you can break this cycle before it takes hold. The next step is acceptance. Accept that the fear is part of being human. We all experience it, and it's okay to feel afraid. But it's what you do with that fear that matters. When you accept your fear, you take away its power to grow into something more destructive. By accepting your emotions as they are, you prevent them from turning into anger or hate. You allow yourself to feel without judgment. And that is where the healing begins. Finally, letting go is key to stopping this. Let go of the need to control everything. Let go of the anger, the hate, the need for things to be different than they are. When you let go, you allow emotions to pass through you without taking root. You stop feeding the cycle of suffering and start creating space for peace, for compassion, and for understanding. Letting go doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means acknowledging them, learning from them, and then releasing them. And then releasing them. The path to peace lies in mindfulness, compassion, and letting go of attachment. Confronting your emotions head on, taking responsibility for how you feel, instead of letting those feelings control you. May the Force be with you. Humanfluence out.